It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sky sat low and grey like an old wool coat. I had just brought in the mail, sorting through the usual clutter, store flyers, insurance offers, and a reminder from the pharmacy, when a thick envelope caught my attention. It was from the bank, but I hadn't requested anything. I sat down at the kitchen table, my tea still warm beside me, and slit the envelope open with the side of a butter knife. The statement inside listed recent activity on my credit card. I don't usually check those closely. I've had the same small expenses for years: utilities, groceries, an occasional lunch out with friends. But this time something was off. There were charges I didn't recognize: a weekend stay at a luxury spa resort 2 towns over, 2 pairs of designer heels from a boutique I couldn't even pronounce, a tablet, top of the line, and all charged within the last 3 weeks. My heart beat a little faster. I turned the page over, rereading the dates. That was the same weekend my daughter Carla and her husband Dean had visited. They'd offered to do the shopping for me, said they'd pick up my prescriptions too. Carla had taken my wallet, laughing. "You rest, Mum. Let us take care of you for once." I remember feeling strangely dismissed by her words. I may be old, but I'm not fragile. Still, I didn't argue. I wanted to believe she meant well. I always wanted to believe that. But now there was a receipt in my hand that told a different story. I stared at the name of the boutique again. I'd never even heard of it, but I could imagine Carla twirling in front of a mirror, grinning. She always had expensive taste. And Dean, he liked to keep up appearances. He once told me that image is everything, especially when you're trying to impress your network. He never really looked at me when he spoke, not unless he wanted something. I folded the statement back into the envelope and placed it under the mail pile, as if hiding it could erase what I'd seen. But the damage was done. Something in my gut turned over. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold little knot of realization. They hadn't asked. They hadn't even mentioned it. That weekend, I remembered, Carla had brought me flowers, lilies. She said she got a great deal on them, smiling too brightly. Dean had talked about their future vacation plans, hinting that maybe one day they'd take me with them to Maui. But his tone had been condescending, like talking to a child who couldn't grasp the logistics. I'd laughed along. I'd offered them coffee. I'd hugged them when they left. And all the while they'd used my card like it was theirs. Maybe they thought I wouldn't notice. Maybe they thought I wouldn't understand. But I did, and now I couldn't unsee it. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew silence was powerful. Silence lets people walk into their own traps. I cleaned the kitchen. I made dinner. I watched my evening shows. But the envelope stayed on the counter, a quiet weight, reminding me that something had shifted. That night, before bed, I opened my old wooden jewelry box, the one my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. Inside was a faded note he once wrote, in his slanted print. "Always keep something only you control, just in case." Back then, I thought he meant a key to the safety deposit box. Or maybe our deed. But I understand now. That night, I placed the envelope beside that note, and I smiled. Not because I forgave, but because I'd finally seen them clearly. I kept smiling, but I also kept the receipt. The following weekend, Carla and Dean returned, like clockwork. They brought pastries from a bakery I'd never heard of, and a new potted plant for my kitchen window, which Dean set down a little too forcefully, as if trying to prove something. I played my part. Grateful mother, warm host. I even laughed at Dean's tired jokes and nodded along as Carla complained about her friend's toxic wedding plans. I stirred the tea, offered them seconds, and smiled. But something inside me had gone still. I watched them now, not with affection, but with focus. They stayed in the guest room again. I gave them clean sheets, fresh towels, and a scented candle. I noticed they'd both brought more bags than usual. Dean's watch sparkled. Carla's nails were done in a fresh gel coat, bright coral, the kind that cost more than my weekly grocery run. That night, I pretended to go to bed early. I turned off the hallway light, shut my door just halfway, and left the old floorboard outside their room untouched, the one that creaks if you step too hard. I moved like I used to when my husband was asleep, and I didn't want to wake him. Slow, barefoot, careful. And that's when I heard them. Their door wasn't fully shut. They were talking low, but not low enough. "Just use her card again," Dean said casually. "She won't notice." My breath caught. I leaned in closer, careful not to make a sound. Carla let out a soft laugh. "Don't tell her we used it last time. She'll get suspicious. She's old, not dumb." Dean chuckled. "Exactly why we got to keep it quiet. She's got money just sitting there. No one else is going to use it." There was a pause. Then Carla. "I mean, it's not like she needs all of it. She barely leaves the house. It's better in our hands anyway." My hands curled into fists at my sides. Better in their hands. Was that what I was to them? A living, breathing ATM machine? I felt the floor beneath me sway. Not literally, but emotionally. A kind of betrayal that no storm could shake me from. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, about trust, about everything I'd given them over the years, without asking for anything in return. I thought of the birthday cards I'd written Carla every year since she was a girl. I thought of the dinners I made, the nights I held her when she cried, the mortgage payments I quietly helped them with during COVID. And this is how they repaid me? In whispers and theft? I backed away from the door and returned to my room. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I didn't even sit down. Instead, I opened my dresser drawer and pulled out a worn leather notebook, the one where I kept passwords, bank contact numbers, and old notes from my husband. Page after page of numbers, dates, contacts. It was all still there. I placed the notebook gently on my nightstand and turned out the light. I stared at the ceiling, the voices from earlier still echoing in my ears. She won't notice. She's old, not dumb. Better in our hands. I'm old, yes, but not broken. And I wasn't about to let them steal from me again. Not because I needed the money, but because they needed to learn. They needed to understand what happens when you take advantage of someone who raised you, trusted you, and loved you without conditions. I thought of my late husband, his quiet strength, how he always said, "Trust is a bank. You spend it wisely or it runs out." Well, their account was empty now. And soon, so would be their access to mine. I reached for the notebook one more time, then slid it under my pillow like a secret weapon. Tomorrow, I'd make a few calls, quiet ones, strategic ones. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't even accuse. I'd simply act. That night, I didn't sleep. But I had a plan. By morning, the house smelled like cinnamon. Carla had put pastries in the oven to surprise me, and Dean was already pacing in the living room on a call with someone, probably discussing stocks he barely understood. I thanked them, as always. I even told them the buns were delicious. Then I told them I had to run an errand, nothing urgent, just a little appointment. I smiled and waved as I left the house. But my steps were deliberate. My purse was light, except for the two things I needed most, my ID and that little leather notebook. I drove to the nearest branch of my bank, not the one they knew I used, but the smaller one across town. The lobby was quiet, just a mother with a toddler and a man filling out a loan form. The clerk called me up. Her name tag read Evelyn. and she had kind eyes, maybe 30 years old. She asked what she could help with. I leaned in slightly and said, I'd like to freeze all activity on my current accounts, every card, every access point. Her brows lifted. Are you concerned about fraud? I nodded once. Family fraud. She didn't ask more. She just got to work. Within minutes, everything was paused. My checking account, the joint savings Carla had insisted I set up, just for convenience, my credit card, even the emergency debit I kept tucked in my sock drawer. I opened a new account under a name I'd prepared the night before. Whitfield Living Trust only. I could access it. I moved half my remaining funds there on the spot. I updated my password, set up multi-step verification, and even added alerts to notify me of login attempts. Then, I signed one final form, removing Carla's name from the financial power of attorney she'd guilted me into signing after my surgery last year. Evelyn handed me the updated folder and gave a gentle smile. You've done the right thing. I know, I said quietly. It's long overdue. From the bank, I drove to a small motel on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with clean sheets and no questions. I paid in cash and left my phone on silent. That night, I sat with a warm cup of tea and opened my notebook one last time. I checked off each item. Freeze accounts, move funds, update power of attorney, create new trust, disappear for 48 hours. Let them panic. Let them try to access the money they whispered about. Let them wonder where the safety net went. I watched the rain patter against the motel window and thought about all the little moments I'd let slide. The times they borrowed just a little and never paid back. The tone Dean used when talking to me, just a shade too arrogant. Carla's sighs when I asked for help with the TV remote, as if I were a burden in my own home. Well, now the roles had flipped. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to demand apologies. I was going to vanish from their financial reach. Back at home, I knew they'd be looking through drawers, trying cards, calling the bank, maybe even trying to guess passwords. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The next morning, I sent a short message through the motel's Wi-Fi using an encrypted email I'd created long ago. Gone out for a few days. Please lock up when you leave. Take care. No love, no warmth. Just distance. And for the first time in years, I felt completely clear-headed. The betrayal hadn't broken me. It had sharpened me. I wasn't an old woman fumbling with receipts anymore. I was a strategist with every move planned, and my next move would be the silence that screamed louder than any accusation. Let them try to buy their little secrets now. By Sunday afternoon, the first cracks began to show. I wasn't home, of course. I was still at the motel, sitting in a quiet corner of the breakfast area with a lukewarm cup of coffee and a newspaper I pretended to read. My phone was off, but I'd enabled email alerts to my tablet, and one by one, they began arriving. Failed transaction notice. ATM withdrawal declined. Dot alert. Card denied grocery store. $312. 45 unauthorized login attempt blocked. Joint account. I stirred my coffee and smiled. Back at my house, I imagined Carla standing in line at the store, trying to pay for a cart full of overpriced organic produce and name-brand snacks. Her credit card swiped, declined, tried again, declined. Dean probably stood behind her, arms crossed, checking his phone, annoyed. He always got testy in public when things didn't go his way. But it was the ATM attempt that gave me the greatest satisfaction. I could picture Dean walking confidently to the bank's outdoor kiosk, maybe humming to himself, slipping one in the card, tapping in the PIN I hadn't changed in years. And then that screen. Transaction failed. Account frozen. Please contact your bank. He'd try again, reinsert the card, same result. The machine probably beeped at him, a tiny digital rebellion. That machine said what I never did. No. The next email pinged 5 minutes later. Voicemail received. Carla, I didn't play them, I didn't need to. I knew their tone. First confused, then concerned, then indignant. They probably stormed around the kitchen, opening drawers, flipping through the mail pile. Maybe they even went into my room, looking for that notebook they never knew I kept. Good luck finding it. It was tucked inside the lining of my old sewing box. The one Carla always said was just junk. They must have called the bank next. I could almost hear Dean's forced calm on the line, trying to explain he was authorized, and this was all just a mistake. He'd try to use charm. Carla would hover beside him, her voice rising when things didn't go her way. But Evelyn, kind, efficient Evelyn, had flagged the account. There were notes, there were passwords, there was no way in. I thought about the times I'd second-guessed myself, wondered if maybe I was being too cautious, too suspicious, too hard on them. And then I remembered the whispers. She's old, not dumb. Don't tell her we used it last time. Better in our hands, anyway. No, I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't overreacted. They had crossed a line, and now they were face to face with the consequences. By Sunday evening, I received one more notification. Attempted charge, $2,130 cancelled. Declined. I tilted my head. That amount. It wasn't groceries. It wasn't gas. That was a flight. They'd tried to book a trip. Maybe a last-minute getaway to escape the embarrassment. Or maybe just to continue the illusion of wealth. But the illusion was gone now, shattered. And I wasn't going to pick up the pieces for them this time. I spent the rest of that evening quietly, took a walk, called a friend I hadn't spoken to in weeks, ate a modest dinner from a cafe down the street. Meanwhile, Carla and Dean were likely scrambling, furious, maybe even accusing each other. I imagined Dean snapping, "Why didn't you tell me she might check?" And Carla firing back, "You're the one who said it was fine." They weren't partners. They were co-conspirators in a failed heist. And the thing about thieves, they never plan for the moment they're caught. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to call the police. I didn't need to. My silence, backed by cold, hard denial after denial from every card and account they once leaned on, that was justice enough. The next morning, I checked out of the motel. But I didn't go home. Not yet. I had one more move to make, because betrayal this deep, it deserved more than just a lesson. It deserved clarity and confrontation. They noticed now. By Monday morning, my house was strangely still when I stepped inside. No scent of brewed coffee, no sound of Carla humming, or Dean on his phone pretending to be important. They were there, though. I saw their shoes by the door. Dean's leather loafers, scuffed, worn down at the heel. Carla's flats, still with the store tag half tucked inside. Probably bought on my card. I walked slowly into the living room, heels clicking on the hardwood like a metronome for what was about to unfold. They were sitting on the couch, silent, stiff, like children waiting to be scolded, but with grown-up entitlement simmering just below their expressions. Carla stood first. "Where have you been?" Her voice trembled, but not from worry, from frustration. Dean stayed seated, arms crossed. "Do you know what you've done?" I said nothing, just placed my purse on the side table, removed my coat, and sat across from them. Calm, direct, ice in my spine. "I made coffee," I said after a beat. "Would you like a cup?" Neither answered. I stood anyway and poured 2 mugs, black, just the way Dean liked it, 1 sugar for Carla. I placed them in front of them like offerings before a trial. They didn't touch them. Dean finally leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Your cards aren't working. The bank said everything's frozen. Did you do that? Carla added, We were embarrassed at the store. The cashier called security. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I raised one eyebrow. Humiliating. I reached into my purse and pulled out a printed copy of my credit card statement. I had highlighted 3 transactions, totaling over $4,000. I slid it across the table. Did I spend $600 at a resort I've never been to? I asked, voice steady. Neither of them answered. Did I buy a tablet I've never used? Heels I couldn't even walk in? Still silence. Carla looked away. Dean exhaled hard, like he was the victim here. We were going to pay you back, Carla muttered. I nodded slowly. Were you going to tell me? Or did I have to overhear you whispering behind a door you didn't bother closing? Dean shifted. You're overreacting. It wasn't that much. It was trust, I cut in. Not money. You stole from me, lied to me, then came back for more. Carla's voice cracked. We were struggling, okay? The bills, the mortgage. I looked at her, really looked, and I didn't see my little girl anymore. I saw a woman who had mistaken kindness for weakness, who saw her mother's savings not as earned security, but as entitlement. I've helped you, I said. I paid off your medical bills when Dean broke his ankle. I covered your rent during the pandemic. I gave you the car when I stopped driving. And not once, did I ask for repayment. Dean stood now, angry. So what? You want us to grovel? You humiliated us. No, I said. I stopped enabling you. I took another document from my purse and laid it beside the statement. It was a signed revocation of financial power of attorney, effective immediately. Carla leaned in and went pale. And this, I said, tapping the page gently, means you no longer have access to anything I own. Not my bank accounts, not my property, not even the emergency funds you assumed you'd inherit. Dean's mouth opened, then closed. Carla tried to speak, but nothing came out. I've already appointed someone else, legally, permanently. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, second after second of consequences, landing without a word. Then I stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a cup of coffee. I took a long, slow sip. It had gone cold, but I didn't mind. When I returned, they were still frozen in place. I picked up the documents and put them back in my purse. No need to call me or text. If you need help, there are programs for that. I'm not one of them anymore. Carla looked like she might cry. Dean looked like he might explode. I didn't care. They had underestimated the quiet woman who raised them, who watched, who remembered everything. And now they were left with nothing but each other, and the echo of my silence. From now on, your emergency is not my responsibility. For 2 days, there was silence. No texts, no calls, no knocks at the door. Then the flowers arrived. A bouquet of pale pink roses, Carla's signature move. Attached was a card that read, Sorry if we crossed a line. Let's talk. Love, Carla Dean. I placed them in the trash. That same afternoon, my sister called. Her voice was sharp with concern and laced with guilt. Carla said you're having some kind of episode, she whispered. She said you froze their cards because you misunderstood a few things. You know she's always dramatic. I let her speak. Let her repeat whatever Carla had told her. And then I told her the truth. Plain, steady, calm. That card they used without permission? It paid for a luxury vacation, and a tablet, and designer shoes. They lied to me, repeatedly, and then blamed me when I took back control. There was silence on the line. Finally, she sighed. I didn't know. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Most people don't, because people like Carla always get ahead of the truth. That night, Carla called. I didn't answer. The next day, Dean called. I didn't answer. Then came the message. Can we come by and talk? One last time. We'll explain everything. I agreed. Not because I expected anything sincere, but because I wanted to watch them squirm under the weight of their own words. I made coffee, set out cookies, and sat by the window until they arrived. They came in carefully rehearsed, Dean with his shirt tucked too neatly, Carla with watery eyes and a voice already trembling. "Mum," Carla said, sitting down across from me, "we're really sorry. We didn't mean for things to spiral like this." Dean nodded solemnly. "It was a mistake. We got ahead of ourselves. But we thought you trusted us." I sipped my coffee and let them speak. Carla reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "It's a check," she said. "A partial repayment. We want to make things right." I looked down at it. A few $100, compared to thousands. But I didn't react. I just leaned back and waited. Dean cleared his throat. "We were thinking, maybe if we worked out a schedule, you'd consider restoring the joint account. We've spoken to a financial advisor. We know how to manage things better now." Carla jumped in. "And it's not just about the money. We miss you. We want things to go back to the way they were." That was the line that broke me. Because the way they were meant me paying for everything without a word. It meant being loved only when convenient. I set my coffee down slowly and took out a small folder from the drawer beside me. Inside were 3 pages. Page 1. A notarized document revoking any future financial dependency from Carla and Dean through the trust I'd set up. Page 2. A copy of my new will, removing them from any inheritance. Page 3. A letter I'd written, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I handed it to Carla. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "I'm not doing this because I hate you," the letter began. "I'm doing this because I finally love myself enough to stop pretending this relationship hasn't been one-sided for years." She blinked fast, holding back tears. Dean said nothing. "Take your check," I said, sliding it back across the table. "Use it to start over, on your own terms." Carla's voice cracked. "So that's it? We're cut off?" I met her eyes. "You were never owed. You were trusted, and you broke that." Dean stood abruptly, jaw tight. "You know what? Fine. We'll be just fine without you." "I hope so," I said, because despite it all, I did. They left in a blur of angry silence and slammed car doors. I watched them pull out of the driveway. The sky was starting to darken. A quiet wind lifted the edge of the welcome mat. And I felt still. Not victorious, not vengeful. Just finally seen. You called me naive. I called it strategic. After they left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the dust settle behind their car as it disappeared down the road. They didn't look back, and neither did I. That night, I took a long bath. I poured myself a glass of wine, just one, and sat by the window wrapped in my husband's old cardigan, the one that still faintly smelled of cedar and pipe tobacco. For the first time in years, I didn't feel obligated to call anyone. I didn't feel guilty for being alone. I felt free. The next morning, I went to the senior center downtown and asked about volunteer opportunities. They welcomed me like an old friend. I started helping out with the knitting circle, baking on Fridays, and reading to a few of the residents who had trouble with their eyesight. No one there knew about Carla or Dean. No one looked at me like a wallet or a backup plan. They looked at me like a person. I even started attending a local estate planning class for retirees, just to make sure what I'd done was legally sound. The instructor, a retired judge, reviewed my documents and said, "You did everything right. Most people your age don't think this far ahead." I wasn't always like this, I told him. But betrayal sharpens you.